Wheelbarrow committee who keep this space open for poets. And I'm always a little bit shy and embarrassed because I don't attend often because
you have to do something.
because I run, courses for the Life Writing Collective and we have follow-up gatherings. So my time is quite tight and I'd very much like to be here, but it's usually not possible. But so I just wanted to explain why I drop in very, very occasionally, but very grateful for the space. Thank you. So I want to share the screen. What I've done is taken poems, some recent, but a lot of them quite old, because this year I've been writing mainly short stories. I'm lucky enough to be having a collection of short stories come out. I think there was Karina here now. Anyway, so I've been focusing on that. So not many poems have been downloading. It's been more stories. So this is a mixture of old and new. I haven't curated them very well. I've just thrown them in the pot. I've got a curated beginning and end, and the rest is just a big potpourri, I think is the term. Let me find this now. There we go. So the first poem is called Poet. When I was young, I spoke the wound with one determined voice. There's still breath enough to loosen the verse and sing the self that's buried beneath a sermon. That's a note to self to loosen up. That's didactic thing that one can get into when you want to prove a point or say something that's really important, rather than letting the poem speak for itself. And this one I might have read here before, poem. The poem is at the periphery. The poem keeps quiet and observes. The poem stays small, keeps open. Something new is arriving. This one I wrote while running a course, a nature writing course. And I participated in this particular writing exercise to go and sit in this wonderful wild garden and just observe and write anything down that came. Mint the sun, my perimeter skin, fresh green branches of wind show the cloud-flung puddles, a gust of sky flies inveigling a tree, a cathedral of leaves, diffuse a drench of oxygen, earth lung. Minimal, essential miracle, a rapt attention of bees, flower hover, across the flecked slate, a tranche of ants align. I am breathed lyrical, imbibed to the lees. Late meeting. This is a fairly new one. At first, we were startled by the rustle that signaled the approach of the other. We are two old children, rattled and imprinted by hurt, both tending to be vigilant, wrapped tight in a tough, alone coat. I am finished with those who offer the intimate skirmish, the flirt, the candle-lit kiss and truss of romance, the fickle compass of tumescent lust, the false promise, heart-shaped sentiment embedded in absence, the fleeting rapture. Yet here you are across the table, your kind face patient, present, determined, though alert and exposed with fright. You offer possible love, a bridge that looks remote, unstable. Between us shimmers the liveliness we feel but cannot see or capture, a trajectory that asks for trust, belief, connection, for the crux of meaning, that elusive, whimsical measure. And here we are, singing in my kitchen, you on guitar, as brinjal stir-fries on the gas hob's tiny fire. Small pleasures after lives steeped in jeopardy, drama, rupture. I know in a moment you will take my hand, and I will take a first tentative step to check if this is always a flimsy structure or whether it can withstand the full weight of hope. This I might have written before. This is, oh, it's one of those memories that don't leave you until you put it down as a poem and then somehow come to terms with it. This was when I was a very young doctor and working in the emergency unit. Some things are still is the title. It's also the first line of the poem. Some things are still too hard to look at, like looking at the young, hard girl I was when I told a young girl in my charge not to look at her formed child born too soon, lying too quietly on the hospital bed in the mess of blood between her legs, still birth in the emergency room. She's with me still, the young mother, and how she quietly obeyed my failure. There's moments you wish you could relive and do something differently. So this was a big experiment. I woke up with this line in my head and I decided just to follow it on down. Called Looking for the Evidence. Not sure about the title, however. The crow in the west. This phrase on waking plows her mind. The birds in black animate the wires of her thinking. She's searching through the waste, the way her husband sat on their bed years back, his naked skin slaked wet, laughing gently at her distress. Wind is gnashing at the trees. The climate turns impersonal from flood to drought. Scars remain, filling the gouges after crash. She goes by touch, reads her aging face like braille. Her hurt could well be mythological. Flocks of crows know how to adapt. They're going through bins, searching past used nappies for edible potato skins. The earth is no longer flat. The world careens, west blurs into east. A poem might gesture in the vague direction of a dream. Oh, metamorphosis. I see my son is actually here. And so this is something he said to me a long time ago. Metamorphosis. I don't recognize you, my adult son said. I'd become a girl, touched by love, thrown dizzy high, falling into the old familiar feeling with some surprise. Hormones, the delicious morphing elixir of oxytocin and endorphins, upset my rational pedestal. It didn't last. Again, I am myself. My son no longer has to wonder what happened to his mother. Okay. I don't know about this poem, but I've thrown it in anyway. I like it, and I also, I don't know. Okay, we'll take this risk. Body products. Skin, tendon, hormone, liver, bladder, bones and valves, tongue, nerves, the pancreas, the calves. 1 billion years to get to this. Sweat, sebum, milk, snot, semen, blood, serum, life in secretion. This motion, this dance, these glands, this urine, this perfect shit. 1 billion years to get to this. Sonatas, tapestries, sonnets, aqueducts, this poetry, the hand axe, this filigree, bread and wine, the olives, Monets, mosaics and novels, cathedrals, shrines. 1 billion years to get to this. Fluorescent malls, anti-age lotions, lurid plastic, the drones, massacres, these landfills, ocean toxins, the infiltrated habitats, dumpster culture, the fakes, the waste. 1 billion years to get to this. Okay. I think parents will usually have a moment when their children, when there's a huge moment of difficulty. And I have to say, I've got two lovely sons, and both of them in their adolescence and just after, there were moments of extreme difficulty, which fortunately have resolved, but this poem was written in the middle of difficulty. My son comes in and shows me three faces of God. The last is too awful to look upon. I must. This is my son. I try to stop from turning to stone. So broken. Sometimes you take ideas from other people's lives for poetry. This was with permission. Broken. The toy horse falls, knocked by accident from the shelf. Its leg, stoic and brittle, breaks. The small boy, tearful, shows an uncle who gives him a tube of glue. The boy tries hard like he always does, not knowing how to fix his parents' domestic mess. The horse leg sits, stuck back skew. Now it's lame, he's made things worse. His father's long gone, left home, but the small boy knows he's to blame. The glue of family rendered useless. The boy wanders out of the house, climbs the tree, sits by himself, sick with crying, wanting his father joined to his mother, wanting the father to come home, wanting him. What he wants is impossible, so he prays for the leg to be restored by a stroke of magic, so he can ride away. Okay, so I don't know, there are a good few poems that have this form. I don't even know what it's called. There's actually a wonderful one by, I think his name's John Stone. He's a medic who's written one for medical students on their graduation. And it's called Igatur, what's it called? Igatur, I'm not a Latin scholar, but there's a well-known phrase, Igatur something. If you want to look it up, it's worth reading. And then, of course, there's the Wendy Cope, the one about her man, the list of things about her man. Anyway, so I thought I would experiment with it in a more light-hearted way. Things that get you. For today, I sit at my desk. For my desk might be a door leading someplace I have not been before. For also, through the window, the mountain climbs away from me, and the sea goes in its own direction. For my wastepaper basket is full of ideas that don't know where to go. For desire gyroscopes in my mind behind a wall of thought. For this might be the very last day, or it might be the first day of the rest of my life. For I sit and contemplate all the many things that have come to pass, also all the many things that have not come to pass. For my life as it has turned out has a shape I did not plan, and my writing as it has turned out has a shape all of its own. For the birds that sip the flowers in the bush outside seem to know what they are doing, and the winter season seems to have arrived at the right time, and the cat who caterwails on the wall is immersed in what he is doing. For a place for everything, and everything in its place, was my father's favorite saying, which is probably the reason I have found myself out of place and out of poem. For in this hour, as I observe the poem of the world roll by out of reach, a notable quote by Winnie the Pooh comes to mind. For he said, "Poetry and hums aren't things you get, they're things that get you. And all you can do is go where they can find you. For then I get up from my desk, put on my hat and shoes, and leave." Sometimes walking up the mountain, I find a poem. So sometimes that's actually sage advice. Leave a desk, go and walk. Something about the wheel of the perambulation that stirs the creative pot, I think. What's left? There are struts hidden inside the body, long battens that prop up our sentient flesh, that bend at convenient lengths, the scaffold and tent pegs of the skeleton, immersed in life's center, supporting our motion, the dance and the roam, the traverse across the room of this world to the place where we exit, the earth wound that swallows and dissolves us, leaving only our old collapsed bones, stacked, unmoving in the midden. It's quite a thought, eh? So, this poem, I was exploring my own capacity for assumptions. It's called Visit. There's doom in every room. The television is always on. A stag's head, dank and bedraggled, hangs on the stippled wall above our lunch. Our host lurches around his home from an old stroke. His daughter has stacked the kitchen countertops with boxes of chocolates and goes downstairs to connect to Microchip America. The garage is hung with arrangements of tools to apply to anything mendable, while 8 fridges, humming and filled, wait like sentinels for the apocalypse. Tree green shadecloth is draped over a split pole framework that leans above the filled-in koi pool. He heaves his stiffened leg across the lawn to show us the pawpaw tree, pregnant with protuberant fruit, also the pecan nut, the cashew, the macadamia. Near the fence, another small tree holds out bunches of brown-purple coffee beans on the branches of its arms. A squabble of hens squawk and cluck, each shifting on an ellipse of eggs. He has vacated his master bedroom to make space for us, with the welcome of fresh linen folded open with something akin to grace. An aroma of roast drifts from the oven as we sit on the stoop and chat, catching up, our stories touching, our lives so full of character, so vulnerable. Something opens, a heart place, still fixable, in this oasis, unconditional. Okay, this is one of those poems. It was a lot longer, and I went round and round. You go round and round and round trying to find the solution to where the poem's going to settle. I suppose like a dog, round and round and round till you find the place where you can lie down. And it ended up being about a third the length of what it started out. So it's called What Happens Between. I arrive through the portal of my mother's body and leave through a pit in a weeded field. Something happens in between, depending on the blow-up plastic water wings of meaning. What if I used instinct to take down poems, also all walls, punctuation, and defenses, like joyful, cavorting, wild horses, relying on the blind pull of sixth sense instead? So there's a flipping typo here. You see that? There we go. My inner proofreader is in trouble. Okay, sounding the past. I can see her now, the young woman riding a brave boat over the dark waters of herself, held by the ribbed rhythms of her life. Wife, mother, worker, writer. She thinks of her child as her own, as though he can be known, can be saved, even as he grows more opaque over the years, even as she cares for him so carefully, fed, bathed, read to, hugged, put to bed. Nights she watched over his damp, sleeping head, her heart in a painful clamp, yet also afloat with what she thinks is love, so different from what she was served when she was young. Now she discovers that her child felt unseen at times, that he thought she found him wanting. How is it possible he was lost to her best intentions? Now her heart clamps with something like regret, a wish that somehow she could remake the past. If only she'd had more skill in navigating or more accurate charts. We hurt them most, those we love the best. Still, neither of them is wrecked, and both of them continue, fed by the mystery of the ocean's literal kitchen. In her peripheral vision, she sees a hand held out, the prospect of being forgiven. So, open notebook. We can't help but bring our convoluted histories to the open notebook of our bed. These threads pull at past lives and loves, and sometimes snag an argument against our better judgment. We are born into cross currents, a dense tangle of circumstance and genes. In the dark, I take your hand. We make this warm link. We know that down the decades, our hands have held several others. They say we are made of clay, malleable tablets inscribed with the first recorded stories, then baked to preserve meaning. Yet clay can change shape before the firing. Let's discard obsolete stories and create a new vessel, heal what's been broken, torn. Our bodies already write new scripts upon these sheets and cup different forms, forged from the fierce and tender release. Truce. Okay, this is an old poem that I've reworked. If I am chains and you are flight, as you insist, how might we escape our trap? At night, our Venn-like boundaries overlap, and we catch fire and smoke, despite our scraps and tailings. So this is one of those memories that won't leave you alone until you write it down. One of those moments where your life changes. First aid. Today, while walking in the long song of the body, through fynbos that scatters bright points of light in the brush above the bay, I think back 20 years to that room full of children, some squirming inside the trap of education as they look away out of the window. Adulthood is budding in their bodies, bodies that can break, that might already know broken. Beneath their youth burn many silent hurts. I stand here before them to explain survival. Yet on that day in late April, I can barely hold myself upright. How to splint a broken bone, my own life breaking. What to do when you're on fire, my own life burning. How to treat snakebite, my own life poisoned. Chemical splashes in the eye, my own vision damaged. Today I am stopped by a tiny flower of delicate overlapping petals in saturated vulnerable blues, rooted in land, held up to sky, sun-infused, utterly hopeful. I stand and wonder. Long ago, those young people escaped into their lives. How many have coped? How many survived? We wonder about the effect we have on others, if anything. So this happened quite recently. It was very dramatic. The coming hunger. A Karoo afternoon, haze like dust or smoke on the horizon. We drive into a sudden storm of locusts, their crisp pod-like bodies pelting our windscreen in terrifying rhythms like a Hitchcock film, the gravel road brown speckled with both crushed bodies and the flood of those still surging like the runoff after deluge, incessant, the air flecked and stinging with clouds of plague, our car windows wound tight against this pest invasion, wave after wave of arousal chitin, rain hitting our vehicle, the half-broken insects' feeble scrabble as they stutter and crawl in the windshield's gutter, serrated twig legs angling, eyes blind as wire mesh, the opaque blur and flicker of wings. In a field beside the road, 2 dazed subsistent farmers in overalls stand exposed in the eye of the turbulent scourge. They linger outdoors, watching the migrating swarm persist like a pixelated flying acid trip. The driven infestation inflicting its curse, the voracious feeding of these creatures, the raised harvest, the rasped stubs of their mealie crop protruding from the ground around them, conjuring images of empty cupboards, the coming hunger. Later, we walk in the veldt above the farmhouse, where the tail end of the swarm, drifting on the wind, looks like snowflakes lit by the slant evening light, bright motes floating against the dark silhouette of the hill. Our farmer friend stops, tells us that when the hoppers hatch, locals wade through the crawling swathes, aiming arcs of poison spray at the living river of insects. He shakes his head, tells us that years back, birds used to feed on the abundant feast, birds that now are dead. These unintended consequences. Okay, so I'm struggling with this title. I don't think this is right. Her Hands. Beauty sells reject handbags and sweets to fund her Vibracrete and corrugated iron preschool, where she harbors a roomful of township children. Outside, lost youths drift and prowl, smoke and fight, knives never far from one another's throats. Come afternoon, some children cling, not wanting to go home to absent, drunk, and battered parents. Beauty is saving these children from drowning. Every day she moors them on the floor beside her, their upturned faces enthralled, their bodies riding the handmade tales she creates to help them weather their traumas, lifelines of survival. She tells me about the photocopied letter smuggled out of Robben Island, smuggled by her brother into their home in Sutherland, the page brown from many hands, the paper breaking at the folds, but Madiba's written message held. Poverty is not your fault. Poverty is a system made by men. We can unmake it. As a child, Beauty held the subversive story in her hands, passed on, dispersed, a lifeline for our land. Two little haikus. A squabble of gulls stand in their own shadows, beaks like prows to the wind. I love it how they all stand facing the same direction. Bare branches flare against a cloud-mottled sky. Haikus everywhere. And I think this is the last one, yes. This is very funny. Somebody was in a creative writing course, and this is what the very well-known poet said to her. So I couldn't resist writing this lesson. The well-known poet says, "It's all about the line break, where it starts, where it stops. My eye has always been on everything else." That's it.
Order. Zoom meeting system.
Can we have a hand for Dawn, please? That was a lovely reading. Can you hear me? It's like that.
Thank you, Doc.
Dawn, thank you. All right, we'll unmute it. Thank you so much for that. That was a wonderful reading, and I love the way you stay with discomfort Pay attention. What else can we do? What else is it about?
Yeah. Well, how do we put these things down, hey? The things that trouble us, or, you know, how do we bear witness, or all the different kinds of discomfort, you know, the regrets you have, or the things you feel enraged about or concerned about for the future. And I think it's an important thing to explore it on the page, so you find out more about your own thinking and feeling. Like Joan
Yes.
Didion says, I write to find out what I think and feel.
Yes.
But then also bearing witness, you know, bear witness primarily to yourself, and then maybe to the world,
Yes.
if it resonates with someone else, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always thought that anything I write, I hope, well, not anything, but most things, it's like what I expect from seeing a play or reading a book or reading a poem. You know, I want to go away with something to think about. So I aim to do that as well.
So
You have done that.
I'm going to throw the you know, I'm going to sort of throw the lines open. Am I mixing metaphors there, Dawn?
That'll do.
That'll do. So I don't know if there are any. I have a question, but if there's someone else with a burning question, I want to go first. Okay, I'll start us off. So I love the poem. They've because I didn't see them on the screen. They've I don't know that I remember all the titles, but what really stayed with me is this image of animals and plants sort of knowing what they're about in a way that human beings don't. And so we have to, well, maybe not think so much, but discover. And I don't know if you want to say something about that. It feels to me as if writing gives you an opportunity to discover what it is that you're about in a way that isn't just intellectual.
Yeah.
You want to say something about that?
Yeah, you know, I think of it as the blessing and curse of the frontal lobes, you know. Our
Yes.
frontal lobes are extraordinary, and we do amazing things creatively with this capacity, but we also do terrible things, you know, and we're our own worst enemy, as we know. So yeah, and I think that writing, it's a nice way of putting it, Jacques, allows you to explore that gap between the blessing and the curse of one's own thinking, thought habits and behavioral habits, which can either impact harmfully or helpfully on ourselves, our relationships, and the earth. So yeah, I think that's why we're born creative, so that we can explore that gap and trying to get to know ourselves and what to do about it. You know, why am I here? What am I going to do about it?
I was struck by the poem where you say, you know, it took 1 billion years to get to this, and then you list the good, the bad, and the ordinary.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why I like the poem about the locusts so very much is that everything is struggling, not only the human beings, the animals, the insects. You know, it's you have a real sense there of the kind of basket of life in which we are all kind of enmeshed. Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, sometimes in the poem about the beautiful blue flower, for example, you get the feeling that the flower has a refuge, the flower has a kind of form of organization, which the human animal does not. But certainly in the locust poem, everything is a chamos, you know.
Yeah. For sure.
Or driven anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
And there are wonderful images in that poem about as a means by which you get there. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, it was so extreme. And of course, that experience, I mean, there's a lot of ways to describe it, you know, so it gave itself to me in a sense.
Yeah, they were in your face, literally, the other side of the
Totally.
windscreen. Yeah.
Totally. Dished.
So true.
Yeah.
Do you find that you can go back and, how can I say, comfort some of the people that you've been who were struggling?
Sorry, Jacques, comfort people who?
Do you find that you can go back in writing to some of the people, you know, and comfort some of the people that you have been who were struggling?
My younger selves.
Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. It's a lovely way of putting it also. Yes.
Well,
for
it's
sure.
a rhetorical, you know, I mean.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's yeah, it's an essential thing, you know. I mean, I remember the moment where I suddenly felt that I loved my 9-year-old self, and I hadn't even realized how much I had not liked her. And I think my creative life, my writing life, it helped me to get there. You know, what is it? Why is it so hard for us to love ourselves, to take care of ourselves? I mean, these are essential questions, because we're busy destroying the only two homes we really have, our bodies and the earth, you know, through our, some strange incapacity, lack of capacity to see what it is we're doing, and to, to love ourselves, love the earth. I mean, there's that wonderful poem by Patricia Schonstein. I forget how it goes, but she says, how could I let this happen to you, you that I love so much? She's talking about the earth, you know. If we really loved our bodies and loved the earth, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing, you know. It's easier said than done, but still, we've got to wake up to that as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Dawn, hi.
Hello, Ed.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you, because every time I hear your work, I'm struck by how brave you are, and how many risks, or just that you take risks. Yeah, and there are quite a few of them, emotionally, with language, with form, and as Jacques said, you stay with those, you stay with that discomfort, and so appreciation, and love, and I was also wondering about, there are many beautiful lines in what you read tonight, and one of them, perhaps because I read the poem previously, broken, the glue of family rendered useless. I wondered if you wanted to perhaps say more about poetry, family, that sort of space, how you negotiated that space.
Could you, thank you for your kind words. Could you be more specific about your question?
Okay. Have you found it difficult to write about family related things, or I'm sorry, this is
no.
like a
Not really.
It doesn't look like it, but yeah, I just wondered how that felt for you, how you've experienced that.
So I mean, that was obviously a story about somebody else, but yeah, I mean, where one comes from is so formative that I think, you know, it's such rich terrain. I sometimes wonder to what extent you can keep on mining your life for event and motif, and but I suppose it's like onion skins, you know, or layers of the onion, to use a terribly overused metaphor. You know, you keep on seeing your life in new ways, or deeper levels, or, you know, but yeah, I'm fascinated by family systems and societal systems, how they work, how they operate, you know, what makes them work and what makes them break down. Yeah, and always the child, the child often is the one who suffers. And then what does the child do with that suffering? Does the child become self-harming, or does can the child overcome? What causes us to overcome our difficulties? And I think creativity is part of that. It's a resource for us to come to terms with what happened to us. I mean, this is why I do the work in the Life Writing Collective. Although I'm equally interested in how we can grow our capacity for love. Because you need a strong foundation from which to explore your own difficulties. So I think writing into things that are working in your life are as important as writing into things that are not working in your life or in the world. I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, I've written a lot about family. I've written, a lot about conflict and difficulty and the paradox, because, love and anger can coexist in the same room. What does that mean, And the thing about poetry is that it can cope with paradox and contradiction. So, it's not about there's only one right answer and you've got to be right. You know what I mean? There's that our terrible need to be right. I think that regular creative practice helps us to tolerate differences in the same space. And we need that for relationship. As soon as you've got two people in a room, there's going to be a difference of opinion at some point. And then what are you going to do about that? So because creativity feeds on paradox and contradiction and doesn't need one final answer. It gives us more capacity to cope with difference, I think. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything about this.
I just want to say yes. No other, can it be that there are no other questions or comments? Because if not,